Good morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Jail Resource Team meeting. It's Thursday, September 30th, 2021. It's 11:06 a.m. My name is Ty Menser, Chair of the Board. Vice Chair Commissioner Edwards is excused today. To my right is Commissioner Carolina Mejia. To my left is the County Manager, Mayor Chavez. We have also she's not quite on screen, it doesn't look like, but our Criminal Justice Regional Program Manager, Leah Landon, just over here. Let's get her on screen if we can. A whole host of folks on Zoom that I'm going to not introduce because introductions is on the agenda, so we'll get to that. And I'm going to just be handing the public is allowed to follow along through the YouTube channel. This is live streamed. We have 2 hours slotted, and I'm going to pass the baton directly to the County Manager.
Thank you, and good morning. Under normal circumstances, we've had those meetings in person, but we can limit all to COVID as to what we are going through this process, and also we can blame it to COVID as to what we haven't hosted a meeting like this for the last really almost 2 years. For some of you, this meeting was originated back even in I believe in 2016. It had a different name at that time. It was the Jail Crisis Action Team. And I remember when we started this conversation back in the ECC at the Tilly campus, where we had a facilitator to help us move forward on that direction. I believe some of you are the survivors of that initial meeting, so you can reflect back as to when we started the process. And then we had a series of many meetings, maybe on a quarterly basis, and that evolved into this new meeting where we really found the jail resources team just to have an opportunity for all the law and justice partners, all of you, just to have a forum, an opportunity to share ideas and see where we are. And I believe that has been a good model in the last, at least in the last 3-4 years, with not necessarily a specific agenda or outcomes, but through that process, I believe we have learned so much about what we need to do when the next steps perhaps we need to take. So fast forward to today, it is an opportunity again to revive this meeting. Here at some point after the introductions, I will pass the baton to Leah Landon. She's going to be helping us in managing these meetings today, and hopefully in the future we'll get through the point of the logistical aspects. She will touch base on that here in a minute. So before we can start, Commissioner Menser will introduce the individuals here in the room. How about if we go on the screen and introduce ourselves, and I can probably start with Judge Wilson.
Well, hello there, Judge Mary Sue Wilson, one of the Superior Court judges here, recently took over the presiding judge role. Happy to see all you, and happy that that transition happened just before this meeting so I could participate in today's meeting.
Okay. So on the order of the screen, Carrie.
Good morning, Carrie Hennon of Public Health and Social Services. I manage our treatment sales tax and criminal justice treatment account.
And the next on the screen, I believe, is Chief Toma.
Good morning, everyone. Chief Todd Tillman from the Thurston County Sheriff's Office Corrections Bureau, and to my right is Captain Andre Muldrew, who is our operations captain.
Then I think I got Robin, and then I have Mary Ann.
Good morning, I'm Marianne Clear. I'm our Director for Pretrial Services.
Patrick.
Morning, everyone. Patrick O'Connor, Director of Thurston County Public Defense. We might be joined by one of my colleagues, Kevin Griffin, who's just getting out of court. He's our Senior Supervising Attorney for Adult Felonies. He should be joining us.
Thank you. Next, I have the email name, and it's in talk, so please introduce yourself.
It's Kelly.
Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly McIntosh, and I'm with Thurston County Pretrial Services. Sorry, I don't have my full name up there. It's just the email. I apologize.
That's good. Next, Frankie.
Hello, everyone. Frankie Peters. I'm the Court Executive Officer for the District Court.
Wayne,
Wayne Graham from the prosecutor's office.
John. You're on mute.
Sorry, didn't push the right button. Good morning, everybody. John Thunheim, prosecuting attorney.
Right?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Ray Brady, Under Sheriff over at the Sheriff's Office.
And Shelley.
Good morning, everyone. Shelley Slaughter, Director of Thurston County Public Health and Social Services.
Okay, so thank you for joining us this morning. I think we have the schedule for a 2-hour meeting. Whether we can get through the 2 hours, not, hopefully we can give you the gift of time at some point. And I really appreciate, making the time over your lunch hour. So hopefully we don't take the 2 hours as we schedule. So at this point, I formally pass the baton to Leah Landing.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen really quickly. Hopefully get this PowerPoint started. Let's see. I just want to start with a few general reminders. So the meeting is being recorded and it's open to the public, like was already mentioned. And then just for ease, if you can remember to mute yourself when not speaking, that would be awesome. As possible, please use the raise your hand function. I know depending on which version of Zoom you have, that may not be possible, but makes it easier for us to tell who wants to step in and speak or ask a question. And then just try not to multitask. I know sometimes we get lost, and if we could just have your attention for the duration of the meeting, it makes it easier for us to get out of here a bit quicker and, like Ramiro said, give you the gift of time. So our agenda today, you all should have a copy of this as well. We started with introductions and then we're going to move through to the status of the Thurston County Jail. We'll talk about some Blake decision updates, the case backlog from COVID-19, the pretrial services updates, and then briefly start talking about a work plan for 2021 through 2022. And then, of course, frequency of meetings for the group, and then we will review next steps before getting out of here for the day. So up first, Chief Deputy Todd Thoma, if you could start with a status update of the Thurston County Jail, that would be fantastic.
I'd be happy to. And again, thanks everybody. So I try to break these overviews down. And like Romero said, it's been a little while since we've met. So I'm kind of just going back to the spring of last year when a number of us recall COVID entered our community and actually the world and nationally, where we took a number of actions, countywide, statewide, but specifically to the jail and to the law and justice system. When I do have some numbers to report out, my comparisons are essentially from 2019 to 2021 to date, because again, last year, the numbers were somewhat skewed because of our implementation of various protocols, but that's where we saw the reduction in our jail population. So again, since the spring of last year, in 2020, we've seen a significant reduction in our jail population. And again, I want to break this down by successes and then challenges. So again, we saw a significant reduction in our overall jail population. That was accomplished by a number of folks in a number of offices. Again, every chance I give credit to the courts, to the prosecuting attorney's office, to public defense, pretrial services, everyone that was involved in helping us reduce our population. But again, when we responded to COVID in the spring of last year, there was a concerted effort to reduce our population, and that was within Thurston County, but that was something we were seeing on a national scale, both in jails and prisons. So we saw a number of folks from our custody, primarily low to moderate defendants, being released from our custody. Simultaneously, the sheriff's office enacted our booking restrictions and also our warrant confirmation restrictions, with the primary focus being violent crimes, crimes against the person, domestic violence cases, and DUIs with history. So those were the folks we were still allowing to be brought in and booked. And again, there were other exceptions, but primarily it was focused in those areas. So our overall average daily population 2019 compared to 2021 to date, we saw a 41% reduction in our population. In our general population, from 2019 compared to 2021, we saw a 30% reduction in our population. And I wanted to explain the difference. When I talk about general population, I'm talking about the main jail, our dormitory housing areas, our maximum custody special needs areas, the booking area, the kind of the backbone of our jail operations. When I talk about our overall population, I'm including numbers such as electronic home monitoring, work release, day jail, day reporting, community betterment. All these various options programs are then added to those numbers. So again, our entire system reduction was 41%, 30% in our general population areas. So these reductions were very beneficial for us, especially during COVID. As most of you are aware, we've had a number of outbreaks, but because of those reductions, we were able to mitigate those outbreaks and respond to those outbreaks. And with the assistance of public health and social services, we were able to end those outbreaks in a fairly quick and efficient manner. And again, that was because we had that flexibility in some of our housing areas. So again, the positives were our ability to mitigate COVID and COVID outbreaks, but we also saw, budgetary impacts as well to the positive, because again, our population was reduced, the cost of operating our facility was reduced. So those are some of the successes that we've seen since the spring of last year. Some of the challenges have been is, if we go back originally to what I was talking about, the focus primarily of releases early on and our booking restrictions and our warrant restrictions really address those low-level or moderate-level offenders. The high-level offenders, the special needs offenders, continue to be booked in throughout this period and today. And these are folks that typically will be housed in our maximum custody units, whether that's our male maximum custody unit or the transfer area where we have our female maximum custody and special needs defendants. So when we reduced our population early on under the success portion, the folks that were getting released were primarily from our dormitory housing units. We have 4 dormitory housing units and 2 maximum custody units, 1 primary and 1 we started using back in 2016 out of need. But I include that in my overview. So again, everyone did a fantastic job of reducing the population, but primarily it affected our dormitory units. And then also, unfortunately, because of the way the facility is designed and the way the programs were run, we had to suspend our work release program for both males and females. And we also suspended our community betterment programs. All these folks were housed in our correctional options area. So again, the releases were primarily focused on low to moderate, while the high-level offenders, the special needs offenders, continued to come into our facility. And I think we're all aware that there's been challenges throughout this period, this 1.5 year period, relative to the ability to hold court operations. I acknowledge that there have been impacts relative to the COVID outbreaks that we've had in our facility. So we still face challenges trying to get the folks that are in our system, in our facility, get their cases adjudicated. And again, if anybody has any questions, I'm open to questions at any time. But just to kind of give everybody an idea of where we're at and where we came from, the issues associated with our male maximum custody unit and the issues associated with our female transfer area are the same today as what they were in 2017 when we as a county started moving forward with the Flex Unit project. So those issues haven't changed. In fact, they've even compounded, because one of the things that we've been doing since last spring is we've implemented various quarantine protocols for defendants who are being booked into our facility. So everybody being booked into our facility now, instead of being classified at intake and may have gone to a dormitory, are automatically going to one of those 2 maximum custody units for a minimum of 72 hours on quarantine before they're classified and potentially rehoused. Again, that part of that is they are rapid tested at booking, and they are rapid tested again prior to rehousing, but they will go into the maximum custody units for a minimum of 72 hours. So that's not something we were dealing with prior to COVID. So just kind of an example, in 2017 in our C unit, our maximum custody unit, we averaged about 94 defendants in that unit. Our average for 2021 is again 94. So those numbers did not change. In our transfer area for our female maximum custody and special needs, in 2017, we're at 8.6, and average for 2021 is 8.5. So again, that hasn't changed. So, again, I appreciate all the efforts made by everybody to reduce our population, and I don't want to sound like a naysayer. I just think it's imperative for me to identify where those populations were impacted relative to release and affected by booking restrictions, and what defendants are still coming into our facility today and our ability to manage them. A couple of other areas that we're keeping an eye on and tracking is we're seeing an increase in our population. We track, and a lot of folks on this meeting get this report on a weekly basis. It's our in-custody pretrial felons report. We're seeing an uptick in the number of defendants that have been in custody for more than 365 days. And then also we're seeing, and understandably so, we're seeing a shift in our numbers for pretrial defendants in custody. To give you an example, in 2019, our population was about 54% pretrial. That's both felony and misdemeanor, so 54%. So the average for this year in 2021, it's up to about 71%. And again, that's both felony and misdemeanor. So we can see there is a shift in our population relative to sentence versus pretrial defendants. So that, again, this is just kind of an overview. I don't have anything to put up on the screen. I've mastered the microphone and the camera. That's about it for me. So if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them. If not, I can get back with you, by phone or email, or provide whatever data you'd ask.
The commissioners have a couple of questions.
I just have just one question. In regards to the in custody, how many over 365 cases are there now?
Today, it's 25 cases. And I just did Commissioner, I did a kind of a quick comparison this morning, just taking a snapshot. So this is based on the report that came out on the 20th of September. On the 14th of September in 2020, we had 11. And then on the 16th of September 2019, we had 7. So we can see that going up.
Thank you.
Todd, I have a question. I totally understand what you have laid out, so I'm tracking that. And I'm wondering, when the board was considering the flex unit a couple years ago, we had, a memo that predated my arrival here, a whole bunch of options. We kind of went through them a couple times over. One of the options was to convert a dormitory pod into a max security pod. That didn't seem like a good idea at the time for a few reasons, but given the dynamic that you've described, that we've cleared the dormitories out and we still need more max security, is that now a more viable possibility that we should relook at given the current situation, or not? It's
been a year and a half. I would say it wouldn't be inappropriate to go back and start talking about those options again, including that one. Because again, our population hasn't changed in the year and a half. So I can't commit to it, Commissioner, but I would say it would be good to go back and start the conversation again.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Chief Deputy Toma? All right, then we will move.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Chief, have you noticed any change in admissions intakes since the new laws went into effect in July?
As far as which laws, ma'am?
The adjustments to law enforcement approaches to individuals. Just wonder if you're seeing any different numbers or changes in terms of bookings.
I have not, but it's something I can go back and look at.
Perfect. And then Patrick.
Thank you, Leah. Chief, on that percentage that you mentioned, the difference between 2019, the pretrial composition of defendants that are in custody, 54% in 2019 to 71% in 2021. I think that's an interesting, I appreciate you sharing that statistic. Even though our overall numbers are down, the composition's changed. So we're seeing less people sentenced, essentially, intuitively, less people sentenced to county jail sentences. Is that your take, or sort of what's your intuition tell you about that change?
That's my assumption. I mean, based on the challenges of the court, the challenges we faced, there's been a number of factors that I think have inhibited, what we saw prior to COVID, access to the courts, the challenges with in-custody trials, and you and I have talked about it at length, the challenges of moving towards more technology and some of the pros and cons of that. And again, I have to acknowledge the impacts of, when we've had outbreaks. And again, even though we've been able to, address those and bring them to an end, what I would consider fairly quickly, we're talking 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time, where we've had certain housing units or maybe even the entire facility that we weren't able to physically transport to the main campus because of, risks to the community, risks to the courts. So there's been a number of factors, throughout this year and a half that have impacted, the court systems. So it didn't surprise me to see the percentages of pretrial increase.
Perfect. Are there any other questions before we move on? Okay. Up next, we have Blake decision updates. So I think this is really just an opportunity for people to talk about how the Blake decision has affected the jail population and what everyone is seeing. I don't know, Ramiro, did you want to start somewhere specific or just open the floor? Commissioner?
Well, I have a question that I'd like to throw to the group. I've been on a lot of meetings about Blake, and it's usually about, dealing with, kind of administratively dealing with the fallout of the, the back LFOs and who's paying for that, and the court, how the prosecuting and public defenders are going to work with the folks that were, looking backwards. I guess I'm curious, since this stakeholder group, looking forward, how is it working? I mean, drug cases are being charged as misdemeanors. How many cases are being charged like that? Are the judges seeing that's, does anybody have any thoughts about how the new scheme is working, or I haven't really heard anything about that. Drug court and sentencings on misdemeanor, drug possession and treatment and getting people involved in treatment, and looks like prosecutor has kind of.
Yeah, John.
Well, a couple of things on that, Commissioner. To my knowledge, right now, we're really not seeing any drug cases come in at all. The legislative Blake fix, called for mandatory alternatives. The law enforcement is required to use prior to proceeding with any arrest. And those alternatives are really in construction. It's pretty closely tied to some of the conversations we're having in terms of the direction we want to go with the LEAD program and things like that. But we're pretty early on in that process. And that's, from my understanding, true statewide. Various counties were at different stages of being able to meet that. Some counties aren't doing anything because they just don't have any resources. So we're not seeing any incoming drug cases unless they go to the level of, delivery manufacturer that's still in that felony arena. In terms of working on the cases that need to be addressed as a result of Blake, looking backwards, the conviction, vacations, resentencing, things like that. And I'm would be obviously open to Patrick's comments on this as well. We've both now been able to fill the project positions that the board granted. I think we both have our positions filled. And the reports that I'm getting is that those lawyers are starting to work closely together, prosecution and defense, that there's a rhythm that is starting to come together there, and that we're starting to see some motions coming forward. A lot of this initially was just done by the things that we could agree on. And now we're starting to be able to get to the points where we don't necessarily agree on a resentencing or, there's some contested issue or something. And in fact, just yesterday, we entered another order vacating a prior conviction. And so I think that we're, like I said, I feel like we're starting to develop a rhythm, whereas before we were kind of stumbling along because I think Patrick and I were both trying to figure out how to do this with existing resources, and it was just getting really difficult to add that extra work. So that's my comment initially.
Yeah, I didn't raise my hand. Yeah, I think, so when I saw this on the agenda, my first thought was, how's the Blake decision topical to this discussion and the impacts on our Thurston County Jail, right? And initially after the decision, sort of, appreciating the impacts, one thing that we sort of agreed upon as a stakeholder group is, as we go through these mandatory resentencings, when there are hundreds of resentencings for individuals that are currently incarcerated in the Department of Corrections that are legally entitled to come back before our Superior Court judges and be resentenced on their case, and being cognizant of the environment we're in, what we really tried to focus on was to limit the number of transporting physically our clients from the department here to our county jail, have them await their resentencing hearing. And I think we've done a good job on that, to be frank, and really limit the number of transports throughout this entire process, because we really didn't want, as the chief just described, the challenges that they've had and continue to have. We didn't want to add this additional risk, frankly, to the mix. And having done a lot of the cases myself, but as John mentioned, we're fully staffed now with our Blake team, so I've sort of backed off that work. I haven't had one real issue with working with the department. So that, to me, is one thing I wanted to highlight for this conversation. What are the impacts on our county jail? I mean, at this point, I think they're non-existent. I think they've been pretty minimal throughout the entire several months after the decision. But I mean, I think we could probably spend another hour on the impacts of Blake, but right now, and things are going really well. We're actually getting to a lot more cases, which is exciting. I really appreciate the court has created a very specific calendar every week. So these cases can be heard, but the specific impacts to our county jail at this point are very minimum. I can tell you in working with clients, we're doing these hearings and these resentencings via Zoom from the department all throughout the state, whether it's Walla Walla or Stafford Creek, wherever somebody is. We've been able to accomplish that without having transports. And my interactions with the clients have been, they very much want to be resentenced remotely. They really don't want to go get transported to a county jail. So far, I think the impacts to our county jail have been fairly minimum.
Thank you, Patrick. Any follow-up?
Judge Wilson.
Yeah, Judge Wilson, I know you had your hand raised next.
Yeah, so I put my hand up because Patrick hadn't yet mentioned the special calendar. And so we did create in August a special calendar every Thursday, but we also encourage the practitioners to note motions on other calendars where we have capacity motions calendars and change of plea calendars. So we are moving forward. Today's calendar is all filled up, and that calendar we've been having video participation from the facilities, and we feel like it's working very well. Corrections is working really hard across the state to make sure they are able to get defendants appearing. So we continue to, if there's need for more special calendars, be open to that where we can fit it in, but flexible where we put it. And the special calendars been, I think, working really well for the last month or so.
Wonderful. And then Mary Ann, and then we'll go to Under Sheriff Brady. Mary Ann, you're on mute.
Takes me a second to remember to unmute myself. Still, I think, what is it, a year and a half, almost 2 years later? One of the things that I should mention, and I don't want to take anything away from the update for pretrial services that Kelly's going to give us later, but we stopped using the risk assessment tool for the preliminary hearing calendar in pretrial visit services because of the Blake decision. We were using the ANZA tool that the Administrative Office of Courts has, but because the calculation for risk included the possession cases, which could impact their risk score, the governing board and I had discussed that, and we decided not to utilize that. So that is one factor that we don't provide from our department for the preliminary hearings. And I don't know how that has changed anything, or if that has changed anything, or is impacting our jail. But I think that that is a factor that we could note. And when we do look at a new risk assessment tool, that might be something to consider, is the impacts of that. Because it is known that jurisdictions that utilize a pretrial services department do have impacts on their jail population.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Under Sheriff Brady.
Yeah, I was just going to provide a little bit of law enforcement insight to Commissioner Mentzer's question. And I agree with what John had said. I mean, certainly at our narcotics task force level, they are busier than ever with the higher level delivery and manufacture type cases. And they're working extremely hard on that. From a simple possession standpoint, yeah, I agree with John. There's really no cases right now. And, you know, a big part of that is that in the new law as a response to the Blake decision, you know, it talks about first two offenses going to a treatment option. And I don't think we've really defined exactly what that looks like. I know the state has not. And then the other thing is it requires a tracking system in order to get to that third violation that's a misdemeanor. And the state has not come up with any idea as far as who's going to manage that tracking system or what it looks like. I know that, and Wayne's on here as well, that we're looking at something through the LEAD program that may possibly work as a solution for here locally. And I think that's really at this point is kind of our best avenue to do that is to try to do treatment and deal with those through the LEAD program. But we're still working through that. And as of right now, simple possession cases from a law enforcement standpoint are really kind of stalled out.
Wayne, did you have something as well?
No, not directly. I mean, as the Blake money starts to change and we're transitioning into that program manager for Blake cases, the LEAD model could potentially progress over into accommodating exactly what Under Sheriff Brady's talking about as far as that monitoring and compliance and just tracking. But as he said, there was really no direction from the state. So we're just trying to do it kind of ad hoc through our agencies, but more communication is always better. And we're trying to develop mechanisms to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Commissioner Mejia?
Yeah, so I have a question to everyone really on, I know Robin had asked each of your offices and departments to track basically, the Blake cases that your offices were handling. And I just kind of wanted to get an idea. I've been talking with, in regards to funding with some of our legislators and kind of what we can expect in the coming years. And I just wanted to get, it's easier for me to talk, if I'm hearing it from you, and I've talked to some of you about this, is, what's been the impact of the cases? How many have been dismissed and how many are pending? Do we have any idea on that?
You asked a couple of questions there, Commissioner. I mean, how many cases have been dismissed? All of our active felony simple possession cases at this point have been dismissed. There are no active felony prosecutions for UPCS that are going on. I'll let John speak. I know he's coming up later in regards to our referral backlog. We haven't been able to really dig into the numbers there, but the state won't be pursuing, and I won't speak for John, but I'm confident here, won't be pursuing any of those cases as formal felonies. There may be some referrals pursuant to the Blake decision as far as to diversion processes, but non-traditional criminal avenues, not a traditional filing of an information. But I'll defer if John has any other additional information in regards to that. I hope I'd answered the question.
Is there a number attached to those active felony ones that were dismissed, Wayne? Do we know how many?
I can get that number. John might have it a little bit closer. The pending cases that were actually filed, I would put it at somewhere between 100 to 200 cases at a minimum, Commissioner, but I think we can go back and maybe get a little bit firmer information on that.
Thank you.
And that would also include warrants. So we had prioritized in our office anybody on warrant status or with an active case, that those were dismissed. So those were our focuses at the beginning of Blake, but it's a year plus ago now and we've moved on to other fires. But I can work with John and try and get some of those numbers and get those provided to the commissioners.
Thank you. Did anyone else have a response for Commissioner Mejia? Patrick?
Thank you. So Commissioner, I'm just taking a look at some rough numbers right now. So these are pretty rough, just to try to determine. We're tracking each and every case that we're working on. By my calculations, kind of rough. We've done over 100 resentencings so far. We have over 350 referrals to our office from community members that are eligible to have their conviction vacated. But that's just a portion. I think the clerk's office reported that when they ran their early projections that there are over 14,000 eligible convictions for UPCS out of Thurston County, something like that. So, we are taking those referrals from our office and we still have a ways to go. There are still a couple hundred plus cases that are eligible for resentencings currently in the Department of Corrections. We continue to prioritize those cases. based on what we can accurately project as an individual that stands to be released sooner than some of the other clients as their offender scores are recalculated. So we have a ways to go, but at the same time, you know, I think we've made significant progress in the last 60 days. I think as John described early on after the decision, you know, really, frankly, our office and John's office, you know, we weren't really positioned staff-wise to absorb the immediacy of the workload given our trial COVID backlogs and staffing levels that we had at the time. So I hope that's a little bit better information. Again, these are sort of loose numbers as I'm trying to follow the rule and not multitask and pull up data, but we have more work to do, but it feels like in the past 60 days, we have started to gain some traction. I think at least 2 or 3 weeks ago, we started to get through a lot of simple vacation orders. Those are just individuals that are not under sentence that are entitled to that relief. So we continue to develop a process both with the prosecutor's office and the court so we can catch up on where we were 3 months ago and establish a sort of a weekly routine where cases that are identified that are eligible to be vacated without a hearing, that we're getting those orders to the court and then trying to process them on the back end as well. As you know, there's a legal financial obligation reimbursement process that comes after the completion of those vacations. So, more numbers to come, and I can certainly pull some more numbers. The Department of Corrections provides updates to their data, identifying individuals that are affected that are either in custody, or there's also a large number of individuals that are on community custody. I think we still have over 300. That's, again, a rough number. Those are individuals that are not incarcerated but are on community custody, probation, i.e., for a felony offense, that are eligible to have their underlying controlled substance conviction vacated and therefore be taken off community custody. But until the department receives that vacation order, they're going to still show that individual as active on supervision until they receive their order. So we're trying to prioritize those cases as well.
Thank you, Patrick. Mary Ann, I saw your hand pop up and then go back down. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I don't think she was asking me for any numbers. I was going to say there was 26 cases in diversion. I didn't keep track of any of the actual pretrial numbers, but that was the only number that I was going to provide. Those are cases that had also other cases attached to the possession alone, and possession that were on warrant status.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Anything else before we move on to our next item? Wayne, did I see you talking? Okay. Up next, we have the COVID-19 case backlog. Again, this is a general opportunity to talk about how this has affected the jail as well as other areas here in Thurston County. Commissioners, did either of you have anything you wanted to start with?
No.
Perfect. County Manager?
I think Chief Tone already touched base on some of the, a little bit of the impacts of the backlog, particularly related to the 365 days cases. And as a provider perspective, Chief Tillman reported back in 2019, about September timeframe, we were at 7 cases over 365. At that time, even this group claimed that as a success, because 3 years or maybe 2 years prior, let's say 2017, as I recall, we were close to 40 to 45 cases over 365. And it was a concerted effort by all the offices and departments presented here to start reducing that to that level, the single digits, back as reported in September 2019 to 7. So obviously the COVID-19 has had an impact on this. And here's an opportunity as to how we can probably continue with the perspective of continuing to address the 365 cases mainly. I know there's other cases associated with the backlog, but maybe that will be a good opportunity to begin the conversation.
Any thoughts on that? Judge Wilson.
Well, I'll just start by kind of framing the circumstances that are part of the contribution. You all know that between March of 2020 and March of 2021, we had 2 periods of not having any jury trials. We had March till August last year, and then November to end of February this year, based upon public health input. So when you have 9 months of no jury trials, some things are moving, but the pressure to reach resolution for cases isn't there when there's not a trial date. The good news is, since June of this year, we've had the ability to run COVID protocols, 2 trials at a time, one at Chandler Court and one at 102. Commissioner Mejia asked the other day at another related meeting, how many trials have we actually done during that time? In terms of jury trials, the data that I got is since the beginning of June, we've done 14 jury trials, and we've been in trial on 77 days. Some trials have spanned multiple weeks. I just finished a 3.5-week trial at Chandler Court. Some weeks we haven't used both courtrooms for jury trials, and that's because cases might resolve at the last minute because they have a trial set and they go away. There were several weeks since June where there were limitations on jail transport because of COVID outbreaks. So we were ready for a trial, but we couldn't go forward because of that. I'm so glad that Romero referenced the progress we made under FLIP, and then COVID came in and has set us back. But now that we're up and doing trials, we are, of course, making progress. Pre-pandemic, we would average the ability to do 3 jury trials a week in 3 different courtrooms. So 2 isn't quite there, but 2 makes the system move forward. So I think when we talk about backlog, it's not just the getting cases to trial like I've just described. It also includes cases that haven't been filed that will come into the system. But having the trials available, ready, the judge capacity and the courtroom capacity is helping us, move forward, not at the historic pace. And I won't speak for the 2 offices, but I know the prosecutors and the public defenders have had staffing challenges over the last few months. And so sometimes that leads to the court having to grant a trial continuance because of change of lawyer staff. And we're understanding of that, but trying to keep the pressure on in individual cases of having continuances not be any longer than necessary to make sure that the cases are ready. Any questions?
I don't think so. John Thunheim.
So just kind of piggybacking on that, and Judge Wilson did a really nice job of kind of laying out the trial piece of this. But I will say, as I was listening to Chief Toma, I wasn't surprised at all. Everything that he said, I think, is consistent with what's going on in the court system. And there's, in my view, there's kind of metaphorically speaking, there's 2 bubble points that are sitting out there that are both being referred to as backlog. And if you can envision the valve of that is at that point where charges are filed. So there's a bubble that exists between the point where charges are filed and the case resolving. And that's the bubble that's been growing. And I think that's the folks that are in custody are in that bubble, obviously. And I did want to say that I actually think that it's rather remarkable that we've been able to continue to manage the population even during COVID, the way that the chief described, because this bubble has been growing, but the jail population we've been able to keep relatively stable since its original decline. And so I think what's happening there is that the couple of times we've been able to open that trial valve and the cases start to resolve, and we start getting cases out of the system, it eases the pressure a little bit and helps bring it back down a little bit. And then we get these kind of starts and stops that was referenced by Judge Wilson when for various reasons. And then, of course, the other backlog bubble is the one prior to the charging. And that's the one that's just kind of sitting there right now. And I think that has a big influence on the fact that we've been able to manage that jail population at the rate that we have, because there's a big bubble of cases that haven't been filtering into the system. So there's been no incarceration resulting from that. And so our challenge going forward, I think, is as we start to open the valve and both valves, right, start to open more and more, and the cases start to move through the pipe, if you will, trying to continue to manage that jail population, that's going to be our challenge, because we're going to start having an increase in the pure volume of cases going through.
Questions? I do have a quick follow-up question for you, John. You mentioned as we open that valve, do you see that affecting the jail population to the point where it might make it more difficult for the option of renovating one of the other units at the jail for additional max capacity?
I don't know. I agree with the chief. I think, we should, at least what I would support is coming back to that conversation and kind of re-looking at all the various possibilities that were out there and thinking ahead. While there is this bubble that exists prior to the charging point, and the vast majority of those cases we refer to as referrals are going to be in that lower category, if you will. They tend to be much more nonviolent, property related, and so forth. So any incarceration ordered on those cases usually is going to be more dormitory, and the chief could speak more to that, because I use the phrase don't want to be all, because that's really dictated more about how they manage the risk in the facility, right? And it's not always directly related to the charge. That being said, there's still in the pipe, there's still going to be cases coming in with violence, right? And how that mixes out, I'm not sure there's any way to really predict that with 100% certainty. But I think everything needs to be back on the table and looked at.
Thank you. Frankie.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to provide some more information from the district court side too. I know that a lot of our conversations have been around defining kind of that backlog, what that looks like and how we're tracking that. And I don't know if we've gotten to this level of detail, but as far as district court, we end up running regular reports so that we can schedule our cases oldest to newest. And based off of those reports, we cross-reference with everybody that's in custody, and those are the ones that take priority in our scheduling. As of now, the in custody matters are the only ones that we wouldn't actually consider in a court backlog. Those are ones that we're keeping within speedy trial, that we're scheduling for trial within that appropriate time. So I just wanted to provide that additional information as far as how we're kind of tracking those backlogs, what we're looking at, and those priority levels with those in custody matters.
Thank you. Patrick.
Yeah, I'll just add, this agenda item it's a very complicated issue. To think about the impacts of COVID on the cases that have been in the system that are still pending and the root causes of why, it's just incredibly layered. But in addition to what's already been mentioned, I think it's worth sharing that although we're focused on the in custody jail population, which is understandable, we have a tremendous backlog of people that are pending in the system that are not incarcerated. So the attorneys that are working these cases and the court that's hearing these cases, has also a tremendous amount of cases coming through the courts and that are on, my defender's caseload, that's on the prosecutor's caseload for the past 18 months, all with, a 9-month period there where jury trials were suspended. So, I can't underscore the impacts that's had on staff that do the work, and I probably speak for both sides here, but that it's been tremendously challenging. They all have a lot of fatigue as well, and so it really sort of I just don't want that to be lost here. That folks are doing everything they can do on a daily basis to try to get cases resolved, get cases to trial, but it's only realistic that given the pandemic, a 9-month jury trial suspension, all these other factors that, and I know the chief and I talked about this early on, when our numbers were way down, that we were releasing folks, getting people out of the jail when the pandemic just started. And then we were obviously only booking those individuals that met certain criteria. They were going to be held on money bail that they couldn't post. And then we went through periods of jury trial suspensions as those cases continue to come in, that this was just going to build in those units in the jail that, as the chief described, are where still some of the challenges are. So it was very reasonable to forecast that we would have some challenges and see some increases in 365 numbers and other numbers at this point in time. I think if we all had the solution on how to fix it, we would be working towards that. But I just don't want the public or anyone else to think that there isn't a tremendous amount of effort going on every day in the courtrooms to try to get cases to trial, to try to get cases to resolve, at least from my perspective and the feedback from my staff.
Wayne?
Yeah, I can't get my screen to go up, Leah, and have the yellow hand up. So I'm sorry. So I'm glad I went old school. One of the consequences I think that needs to maybe be considered, as John and Patrick have kind of referenced. I'm also not surprised. Some of these numbers I think could be anticipated, but our pretrial services, our pretrial population in jail went from 54% to 71%, and that's based on all of these factors that we've been discussing. But as the cases start to come back from that COVID backlog referral, the number that we're sitting on is significant. As John indicated, the vast majority of those, because booking and arrest conditions were different during COVID, are lower to medium level offenders whose oftentimes their sentences would be a local sentence. They would not go to prison. And so as those cases resolve, they could potentially have an impact on the jail population from a post-disposition standpoint. So again, not having a huge opportunity to dive in deep on the breadth of those referrals that we're sitting on or not able to act on is a better way to put. There may be a consequence as that ball starts to roll down the road, that there is going to be an impact on standard range sentences that are not prison sentences because of the nature of those offenders and offenses. And again, that's a bigger picture conversation, but that would maybe directly impact potentially the jail population as we're going forward. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions, commissioners? All right, anything else on that item before we move on? Perfect. Up next, we have a pretrial services update. I still see Mary Ann, so Mary Ann, do you want to either give that or introduce Kelly?
I'm going to go ahead and introduce Kelly, whom you've met earlier. She's my most tenured pretrial officer. She's been with the county for 29 years, and I asked her to give the update this morning. Actually, it's now afternoon.
Thanks, Mary Ann. Mary Ann has given me the opportunity to give you folks an update on what pretrial services has been doing and is going to be doing. So I really want to first speak up and thank the Board of County Commissioners for all the support that we've had in these past several years. Personnel has probably been one of our biggest strides and advances in pretrial services. I have been here a very long time. Most of you know that. And if one thing is really clear is the development and expansion of not only pretrial services, but what we're doing is probably one of the kind of our biggest successes right now. Frankly, what we've done for 2021 is we started to do our universal screening for everyone in the Thurston County Jail, including district court, and that was in February. And we were at full screening capacity as of May, which put us ahead of schedule. Many of you know that in 2008, during the recession period, pretrial services had to cut services and staffing. And so we were no longer providing services to district court. And now we're happy to say we are back with district court and providing those services to them and doing screening and some supervision as well. And that will continue to grow and expand for the time being. We've also expanded our diversion staffing and have 3 full-time diversion officers as well. So all in all, we are feeling like a really big unit now, at least for me. And so we have a pretty high-functioning unit. We've got some really ambitious and happy people. We've got new folks. They're really learning the process soon. We've even stolen somebody. So thank you. She's an absolute extra gem to our department. So thank you, John. And as I was told, a Jen Tellen with the Principal Research Associate with the Center for Court Innovation referred to us as a robust unit. And having been with pretrial these many, many years, a robust unit is nice to have. For a while there, it was just, we were kind of feeling rather slim, and now we no longer are. Another big thing that our unit has been doing is through the National Association of Pretrial Services Agency, the NAPSA, we have 40% of our pretrial team, and that includes our diversion officers, who have completed a certification training program with NAPSA. And the background on that is what NAPSA does for their certification is look at the historical context of pretrial services in the country, along with the legal and court issues that surround pretrial services, not only court decision-making, but regards to standards, practices, and the goals for pretrial services, including diversion in the pretrial services units. So we'll continue to have our staff work on their certification, but right now we're almost, like I said, we're at 40% of us that have completed that certification training and project. As Mary Ann touched on, we've been going through the risk assessment process with APPR. It's a validation process for the risk tool, which is referred to as the PSA. Currently, we're behind Pierce County on that validation process, but we're not too far behind. And what that will do, again, will be looking at the implementation and training for our staff with that risk tool. We quit using the ASR, which is the Adult Static Risk Assessment tool that came out of the administrator of the courts. The information was fed through JIS and JABS, and the basis of that was on criminal conviction. So with that Blake decision, that information wasn't going to be accurate, and with various counties having their those convictions vacated, we knew that our risk scale was not going to be accurate. So therefore that was suspended, and we're hoping to get this tool implemented based upon our validation in our process. With regards to supervision, we are happy to report that we are at a 91% check-in for those folks who are on and out of custody on pretrial services supervision reporting to us. That's a really great statistic to have. For me personally, being one of those officers who have folks on supervision, even with our remote check-in, even with the changes in COVID, in which many of us were telecommuting and still telecommute, having the ability to have cell phones and have different options for people to report to us, and not just the historical standard checking in, that has really been advantageous. A lot of our folks like the ability to text, call, Zoom, email. We're really finding that many of our folks who are there released on a pretrial basis in the community are maintaining good contact with us, having the variation in the methods of supervising. We also report that of our people who are supervised in the community, 93.7 appearance rate. We contribute that to, again, we have the text messaging reminder system, having those folks call, also having Zoom hearings, maybe not having as many in-person required hearings, but having that Zoom capability for folks who do have some big barriers of just getting here or wherever they're at. We know that COVID really has had an impact with regards to just families and kids and everything else. So we look at having those alternatives to just showing up in court, and having some flexibility as well has been advantageous. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. Where we're moving into the future is there has been the development between pretrial services with both the public defenders and the prosecutor's office of doing pretrial diversion. And right now we have had 11 referrals from that. And through the technical assistance of APPR, again, we're developing and expanding, our diversion programs. In addition to what we're working on in the future is the Naloxone Distribution. We recently had a training with public health with regards to some of that naloxone training, actually how to utilize it. We have not started with any distribution as of yet. Again, with the with public health, with healthcare authority, that will be coming in the future. And the other project for the future as well is the resource hub for those impacted by the criminal justice system. Our goal is to be a one-stop shop. And so as folks come in, we'll have all these various resources. I think we're all recognizing that in order to keep people from coming back, to reduce the recidivism rate, excuse me, I'm sending your call to voicemail, Marianne. I'm using her office. Thank you. The earlier and the sooner that you can get people with some level of resources and intervene sooner, they have a greater chance for success. I think we've all seen that. And so by having folks not having to run all over the county to try to figure out where those resources are, providing them with a resource hub would be to all of our advantage. So that is pretty much our pretrial services update. Unless Marianne has anything else she'd like to add or that I didn't touch on.
Thank you, Kelly. I do want to thank all of our partners. I know that a lot of the work that we have been doing is with the people that are here on the screen. So with John and Patrick and Wayne, I know we couldn't expand our pretrial services diversion to do the pre-charge without you guys. And with Shelley, we've been working with you and your team to expand or to do the naloxone program and to do the training with my staff. They've really appreciated that and been very interested in doing that. And so it's another way that we can serve our community and do new things and improve what we are doing. And I appreciate the partnerships that we have and the opportunities that the Board of County Commissioners have provided. So I just want to thank you guys.
Any questions?
Okay, quick comment. So, Marianne, I know that COVID kind of complicates this analysis, so I don't expect an answer really, but I just wanted to say that I know the commissioners in expanding your services to district court, I think thought was that if district court judges had the value of your risk assessment and supervision possibility, that would make them feel more comfortable releasing more defendants, you know, ones they might have set a higher bail on or not released or whatever. And I know with COVID, it's probably hard to assess that, but I guess down the road, I will be trying to kind of evaluate that as best we can. You know, are a higher percentage of district court defendants being released versus kept in custody, you know, and so we can kind of evaluate the you know, the economic aspects of our decisions. I mean, not that that's the only consideration, but I like to know, you know, are we saving money by doing that? Are we not? Is this working or not working? So I know COVID makes it really hard because we're trying to, district court judges were probably for separate reasons trying to release more people, but it's something I'll be curious about as we go forward.
I think that that's important to look at, is to look at what we are doing and what the benefits are. Something that has surprised me about serving district court and the impacts, at least to the bench. I can't speak for the attorneys. I know I've spoken to both the prosecution and defense. It's been a while since I have followed up with them. Again, we've only been serving them since February, and it's September now, the end of September. But a benefit that the bench has told me that they really appreciate is the screening. And that was something that they really wanted supervision more than what they wanted the screening. And we've had more ongoing conversations about that. But more recently, Frankie and I met, it's either this week or last week, and we've talked a lot about the bench's focus on least restrictive conditions. So Frankie, you have your hand up.
Oh, I was just going to reiterate exactly as you just said. The screenings have been really beneficial, and Commissioner Menzer, I think you're absolutely correct too. It's numbers that we're going to be keeping track of as far as what it looked like in 2018, 2019, skipping the last couple of years, looking to 2022 because of course with COVID and everything, and trying to keep people even more out of the correctional facilities. The numbers aren't going to be so accurate if we looked at them immediately. It's something that we will keep looking at, but I know firsthand from each of the judges the benefits that come out of these screening processes. When we receive those, the judges are looking at every single one and taking those to account with every single hearing. So it's something that in itself has been extremely helpful to all of the judges and the services that are being provided. And we look forward to kind of seeing what that data looks like down the road as well.
Any other questions or comments for Mary Ann and Kelly? Wayne?
The small screen is a real disadvantage because I just saw my boss pop up and I never want to take his thunder. So he's not shutting me down. One of the things, just in conjunction with some of the things that Kelly had talked about, and the backlog and the overall, once we can start getting those things going, is our office is committed to developing some non-traditional approaches for addressing that criminal behavior outside of the court system entirely, which obviously then would keep folks out of the court and ultimately potentially out of the jail. And so it's just trying to wait until we hopefully have the resources to be able to start developing those programs. Kelly and Mary Ann had mentioned a pre-charge diversion. So charges aren't even being filed and we're trying to resolve those cases in that manner. We're developing some programs as well with community youth services for the 18 to 24-year-old group, and continue to work with Friendship because as this group knows better than most, Mary Ann's mandate on the pretrial services diversions, at least pre-charge, are focused on mental health and substance use. Well, we have a lot of offenders that doesn't necessarily apply to. We want to make sure that we've got non-traditional options for them as well. So I'm just wanting to make sure that the commissioner specifically, as well as everybody here, I think does know that our office is committed in developing those kind of non-traditional approaches to handling that COVID backlog with those referrals of the types of cases that we talked about. So just putting that plug in as we're we're definitely sensitive to the overall consequences to the system as a whole, and eventually, obviously, the court system and the jail.
Thanks, Mike.
Nope.
Good.
Good. All right. Anything else?
The one thing I did want to add is, when we talk about unique ways and problem solving with regards to, and again, as I was thinking about how we impact, the jail with regards to pretrial services and just those informal processes. One of the things that we have been able to do with regards to some of our folks, our defendants who are released in the community who do go on bench warrant status, is that they oftentimes will reach out to pretrial services or even their attorney, and we're able to facilitate quash hearings without them having to be booked back into the jail. And so I think by having those communications oftentimes with pretrial officers is the ability to reach out to both parties, the public defender and the prosecutors, and facilitate that and get people back in the process without them having to be booked. And while it's not a formalized process, it is something we've been able to do through this COVID. And so that has had an impact on not being booked back into the jail, but still resolving those cases. And I just want to speak to that, and also thank both the prosecutors and the public defenders and the courts for, letting us be creative enough to do something like that.
Thank you, Kelly. Anything else before we move on? Okay. Well, I think the next two items are going to kind of mesh together, but this was where I think we wanted to take the opportunity to talk about a work plan for moving into the next year. And I know it's crazy to already be putting 2022 on a calendar agenda, but with 2021 already being in its last quarter, I do think we need to start talking about what we want this group to look like moving forward and how we can best utilize these meetings for all of you. So that's kind of where I wanted to start. Commissioners or county manager, go for it.
Yeah, maybe as a point of conversation, I believe this just environment, the opportunity for us to share ideas is, at least from my point of view, extremely valuable. I think there's an opportunity for us to continue to have these conversations. And obviously the Blake decision, see how that's gonna is continue to impact our system, the jail, and also how that relates to lead. So maybe in the next year we can bring the lead, maybe ask Jason to participate on these meetings. It also is going to be helpful. I think it's going to be start bringing those nexus together. Obviously the backlog continues to be part of the conversation, not just the remainder of this year, but the following year. Maybe we can start bringing a little more detail related to that. It includes the flip as well as the first look. And at some point, the first look was extremely successful, and it's something that we may want to consider continue on that process. We talked about the pretrial services. The risk assessment tool is always a good update. The resource hub is a good update because that's going to be something that we need to monitor how the progress goes and the success of that resource hub when it's up and running. And at some point, revisiting my notes over 2 years ago, we started talking about the home monitoring devices and how that tool can probably be as part of a larger context of what we discussed in that today and in the future. And lastly, and something that I need to engage the board, is the flex unit. And the flex unit options that we had at some point, whether the board is interested in for us to bring that back, whether at the board level or at this group's level, and what level of detail the board would like to see in terms of revisiting the options of the flex unit. That's just, to create a context perhaps in terms of what we could probably see coming the remainder of next year in terms of the workload. Thoughts, suggestions, reaction?
Okay, Ramiro just filled our work plan. We're good to go. That's a long list of important topics. I guess one thing that kind of nestles in there from my perspective is just maybe a conversation about, as we're thinking about the flex unit, the options, the non-traditional, all these things that tie together, how the work release facility fits into that is something I've heard people mention that here and there. I don't know what the group's thoughts are about that for the future, so it'd be just something I think this would be a good place to talk about something like that.
Chief Toma, I can see him.
You see him, Chief Toma? Do you have something?
I do, thank you. Again, I haven't mastered that, the comical hand thing. So, and again, I've mentioned this before and I'll say it again. I think Thurston County and the law and justice system and the county as a whole has been very, very progressive and very forward thinking throughout my career. I was sitting here writing down some notes. I mean, when we talk about what we've done over the years, the therapeutic courts, veterans court, mental health court, drug court, DUI court, all the work that's been put towards pretrial services and expanding pretrial services and the great things that pretrial services is doing now. We've talked about, and we're looking at LEAD, we're looking at efforts through our treatment sales tax. We've gone through the sequential intercept process. We've done a number of things over the years, and I'm very thankful for that. And I'm very proud of being a part of that. And I think we should keep moving forward, but you know me, I always have a however. I would like to see, and again, when we talk about these, we're a lot of that focus, and correct me if I'm wrong, is on our low to moderate defendants or offenders. I would like to see some focus on these high level, high needs, high risk defendants that are in custody and not just a brick and mortar solution, not just a jail expansion. Is there something we can do? Because again, I think we do a lot of great things very well, but again, it focuses a lot on the moderate to low level of defendants versus those that have much higher needs or in here for much more significant cases that are here for some time.
Perfect. John Thunheim.
So, everything that's mentioned, I think is absolutely appropriate to be on the table. And I actually like the fact that we are, while the jail population is kind of an underpinning of the conversation, it's becoming much more strategic about the bigger picture. And, we don't have the jail population crisis now that we did back when the group was formed. But things have shifted, right? And so I like the idea of continuing to have this table where we can, I think it becomes almost like a strategy coordination clearinghouse, because each of us have our own, individual strategies that we're working on to deal with the issues from our particular role and responsibility. But to be able to communicate those and find things in common that we can help each other and kind of just know what's going on system-wide, I think that's the real importance of this meeting. And so my suggestion is that, jail population now become only one of the measures, one of the issues that we continue to talk about, and that we have this ability to talk about how are we going to react to the backlog? How are we going to process this? How do we deal with the unexpected things that come at us from time to time, like Blake?
Thank you. Patrick.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think that, the topics that we've laid out for a potential work plan are all very relevant, and it's worth it. It's worth our time to continue to have this type of conversation in this setting on all those agendas. But, I'd just be remiss if we're, sort of circling back to the original purpose of this team and really focusing on our jail numbers. It's just, I wanted to highlight that, we continue to go through this process with Arnold Ventures on our bail reform project. And I think we can continue to make improvements there, right, at the pretrial status on whether or not someone's going to be detained pretrial or not. I think we're all continue to be committed to that mission and looking at those high risk, high needs individuals, like the chief mentioned, exploring, other release options in lieu of money bail. We can still make some efforts there, and I think we're on our way to making some improvements there, right? You heard Mary Ann's stats of those that are assigned to her pretrial service reporting duties are showing up at 94%, right? So I think as we, continue to go through that process, I think we'll get some additional improvements and really examine where we're at right now. So when you see that report that comes out on who's detained and for what and with how much money bail on, I think we can continue to focus there a little bit and make some improvements there and releasing more individuals potentially.
Thank you. Mary Ann?
I agree with Patrick that I don't want to lose sight of what the original focus of this meeting was or is to look at our jail population and the impacts that has and what we all bring to the table and how we can address that and work together with that. I know Kelly talked a lot about what pretrial services is doing, and we've all talked about what we are doing. But there are additional things that we can continue to do and work together on to address and impact our jail population. It has changed a lot. I know when I was first on the pretrial reform population, our pretrial population was our pretrial reform task force for Washington State. I think our pretrial population was less than 54%. If I remember correctly, it was less than 50. I think it was 48%. And AOC had been really impressed with that number. So to know that it has changed and morphed, I know Blake has impacted it, COVID, and there's so many other factors. But I think that while we've all been doing so much, there is so much more that we can do. And to hear Chief say that his needs are with the high risk, the high need, and what populations, there's a lot of brain power around this Zoom screen. And if we work together for some of those things, we could have a really big impact on it. So that is my thought.
Thanks, Mary Ann. Any other comments on that or questions? Okay. So my goal was just to have 5 things to work on, and Ramiro kind of threw my 5 out the window, I guess.
10. Big 10.
Big 10. It's now the Big 10 instead of Big 5. So the next thing I want to talk about too, I think what I'll end up doing if it works for everybody is I'll compile a list of kind of the things that we talked about that should be focused on for the rest of 2021 and 2022 and send out just a survey to all of you to try and prioritize those. What do we see as the top items that we should really be focusing on in the immediate future versus things that are going to take us some more time? So if that works for everyone, I would love to do that. Folks okay with that? Want to take a different approach or? Cool. See some thumbs up. Awesome. So I will prepare that after the meeting and get that sent out to you. So the next item would be the frequency of meetings. I'm not sure how often the group met in the past.
On a quarterly basis.
Quarterly basis. Does that still work, or do folks want to meet more often? No, Ramirez says no. Okay. All right. So we're good.
And I think even since in terms of the reporting and the numbers as we move along, having a bi-weekly, monthly basis really is not going to give us the good conversation per se. So my suggestion will be on a quarterly basis and just see what the group thinks about that. Thumbs up?
I'm good with quarterly, and I would maybe stagger it from the Law and Justice, so it's not in the same month as Law and Justice
Perfect.
Council.
That's good.
Okay.
Yep. And maybe one last question to the group is, we identified, at least I identified that perhaps we need to bring Jason from the lead.
Yep.
Is there anybody else that perhaps is missing on today's meeting that perhaps needs to be part of this conversation moving forward.
I mean, Frankie's here from district court. If, I know judges' time is precious, if, you know, if there's a district court judge, you know, also who has the ability, I think things are gonna come up since we've done stuff with district court that's new. Maybe they can, once in a while, we might have questions for, is it Judge Buckley who's the presiding? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. And I can touch base with them and see about having a judge join us, if not Judge Buckley, one of the other judges here on a regular basis.
Perfect. Thank you, Frankie. Anything else on that then? Sounds like we'll stick with quarterly, but we'll get it scheduled so that it's staggered from law and justice, so those aren't happening in the same month. Okay, if that is it, then our next steps, Wayne, it sounds like you're gonna get some additional data for Commissioner Mejia and get that over to her. I will work with Jason to get him or a delegate of some sort, him or Joe maybe, added to these meetings so that they can be here and participate in the future. And then I will work to compile a list of the priorities that we identified today and things that we want to work on as a group moving forward. And I will get those out to all of you in a survey so that we can look at those and actually prioritize them for what we want to make sure we really address and we address more quickly versus things that might take us some more time. And then Frankie, it sounds like you will talk to Judge Buckley on maybe having him come participate in the future as well. Is there anything that I missed or anything else I should add to my list?
No.
Perfect.
Nope, hearing nothing.
I think we are able to give everyone the gift of what, 23 and a half minutes?
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you so much. Have a great day,
Adjourned for
everyone.
today.
Thank you, appreciate it.